Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the PowerPoint on Chapter 5, the fourth step in writing, found under the sentence sense lesson in the week 3 module. So we have covered the first 3 steps in writing. So step 1, if you remember, was using our pre-writing techniques to come up with a point, right? Because step 1 is to make a point. We also learned that that's called our topic sentence once we actually start to create the paragraph. So our point in step 1 becomes our topic sentence for the paragraph. We learned in step 2 that we then need to use more pre-writing techniques and outlining in order to create the support for our point. And then we learned in step 3 how to make those supporting sentences more connected, more organized, and more cohesive, right? So at this point, after those first 3 steps, we have a paragraph. We've got our topic sentence, we've got our supporting sentences, and we have our concluding sentence. And hopefully we've done our work in step 3 and all of the sentences flow logically and smoothly and all the ideas are connected and the reader understands our train of thought. So we have a paragraph at this point, but it still might not be ready. So in step 4, we are aiming for clear, error-free sentences. So now we're getting down to some smaller details. We're going to learn how to revise the paragraph so that your sentences flow more smoothly and clearly. And we're going to review how to edit a paragraph for grammar and mechanics. But don't confuse revising and editing. So if you think about the writing process, starting from the pre-writing and going all the way to the end when you're finally ready to submit the final product, there's a step in that process for revision. And many people think that revision refers strictly to those sentence level errors like spelling, punctuation, and grammar. However, revising is actually, it encompasses much more than that. And you want to start with the bigger areas first. So if you have, sentences that aren't necessarily stylistically good and you need to rework them, you want to do that before you start worrying about if everything's spelled correctly or if everything's punctuated correctly and things like that. So that's the difference, because the editing, the proofreading is the smaller details. That's the last thing you do before you submit something. But you want to make sure you don't skip the other parts of the revision process, because those bigger issues are really what make the paragraph good. Any writing for that matter. If your ideas aren't sound, if your train of thought is all over the place, if you've gone off topic, those things are much more important to iron out first before moving on to making sure everything is spelled correctly or punctuated correctly. All right. But we're going to take a look at how to look at the style of our sentences and make sure that everything's on point there, and then how to do that final pass of proofreading and making sure that the grammar and the mechanics are good. So there are a few strategies that you want to use to make sure that you revise your sentences effectively. There's using parallelism, using a consistent point of view, using specific words, using concise wording, and to vary your sentences. Now, this PowerPoint and this video lesson are going to cover the first 3 items. We're going to talk here about using parallelism, about making sure we have a consistent point of view, and about making sure that we use specific words. The other 2 strategies, the concise wording and varying your sentences, those will be covered in the next lesson of the week 3 module on grammar and mechanics. So everything that we cover here in week 3, all of it falls under the category of chapter of the step 4 clear and error-free sentences. So, we're just covering them. I want to spend a little more time and do it separately for the grammar and mechanics. So Right now, we're going to talk about those first three strategies, the first of which was using parallelism. And if you think of what parallel means, it means two things running side by side and never crossing paths, never touching. So like parallel lines, right? If you can think of that in an abstract way and how it might apply to language, it's basically two or more things lined up exactly the same. It's almost like following a pattern when it comes to language. And we're going to look at what we mean by that. So we're talking about making sure that our sentences are balanced, that any kind of items in a series are all balanced and they're all structured the same way. It's not something you really need to worry about when you're writing your first draft. But at some point in the revision process, look for the areas where things are a little off balance. And if you look on slide 5, we have some examples. So on the left-hand side of the table, you've got your non-parallel or your not balanced sentences. And then on the right side, you have them revised so that they are parallel and balanced. So our first example here, it says, I resolved to lose weight, to study more, and watching less TV. Now, when I say it out loud, you probably hear it. You sense that the end of that sentence just didn't sound quite right. You understood the meaning, but it still just didn't sound right. It just didn't flow like it should have. And that's because that last part of the sentence is unbalanced. It doesn't match the structure of everything that came before it. Because we have to lose weight, to study more. So what do we expect the last part to be? To watch less TV. And it's a simple little fix like that. And again, these aren't necessarily errors that are going to confuse your reader. They're just going to make them feel like something wasn't right. And you want the style of your writing to match the quality of the ideas that you're putting in. So you want to watch out for the parallel structure. So this sentence should have said, I resolved to lose weight, to study more, and to watch less TV. That sounds correct. Our second example, a consumer group rates my car as noisy, expensive, and not having much safety. Well, is there a way that we could take not having much safety and turn it into one word or even two words to match the structure of the items in the list that came before it? Because the items in the list that came before it are each one word: noisy, expensive. So what is one word that means not having much safety? Unsafe. That's what we should have gone with. A consumer group rates my car as noisy, expensive, and unsafe. Our third example, Lola likes wearing soft sweaters, eating exotic foods, and to bathe in scented bath oil. All right, so we have gerunds being used, ing words. She likes wearing soft sweaters, eating exotic foods, and bathing in scented bath oil. Keep the structure the same. In our last example, it's a whole sentence that's off balance. Single life offers more freedom of choice. More security is offered by marriage. We've got a sentence on each side of that semicolon. And in this case, we're joining them with the semicolon. So we're kind of indicating that they're tied together in some way. So we want to make sure that we balance both sides. Single life offers more freedom of choice. Marriage offers more security. So it's not a terribly difficult concept to understand. And it's just something that you want to look out for before you submit your final product. Go through and see if there are any areas where things seem off balance, or let someone else read it for you and see if they spot any areas that are off balance and need parallel structure. they'll feel it, they'll hear it, just like we hear it when we say it out loud. But it's not always as easy to spot in our own writing. Sometimes we need that extra pair of eyes or ears to see or hear what we don't. So keep that in mind. Maybe have someone help you out with it, checking for the parallel structure. The next thing that you want to do to make sure you have clear, error-free sentences is use a consistent point of view. So the first way we do that is making sure that our verbs are consistent. Don't shift verb tenses unnecessarily. If most of the paper or paragraph is written in the present tense, don't suddenly shift to the past tense. And vice versa. If most of it's in the past tense, don't suddenly shift to the present tense unless there's a reason. Every once in a while there is a reason to switch the tenses, but usually not. And certainly not within one single sentence. So we have an example here. The shoplifter walked quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouts at him, he started to run. So we have past tense and then present tense and then back to past tense. There's no reason for it. It's not being done for an effect. So we need to fix it. So we either want to put it all in present tense or we want to put it all in past tense. So you have two different correct versions here. The shoplifter walks quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouts at him, he starts to run. So that's with everything in the present tense. We could also have the shoplifter walked quickly toward the front of the store. When a clerk shouted at him, he started to run. Very simple. And often those switches in verb tense, they don't happen intentionally. Sometimes we just kind of get lost in our own heads while we're writing. Maybe you got interrupted in the middle of writing something. And then when you went back to it, you just, in your head, something shifted, and now you've used a different verb tense. Easy to fix, though. Again, sometimes it's not as easy to spot in our own writing, and that's why having someone look the paper over for you is always a good idea. But try to make sure that we're not shifting our verb tenses. The other thing with point of view is making sure that our pronouns are consistent. You don't want your pronouns to shift point of view because we have first person pronouns, second person pronouns, and third person pronouns. So in our example here, our first inconsistent example says, I enjoy movies like The Return of the Vampire that frighten you. Well, we understand that the you there is not necessarily talking about one specific person you, but the general you. However, that's not how we started the sentence. The subject in the beginning was first person pronoun, I. So if you want to keep it that way, because you are talking about what you enjoy, so the beginning part probably should remain with first person, I. That means you need to change the ending part. I enjoy movies like Return of the Vampire that frighten me. So keep the point of view and the pronouns correct. Or, as soon as a tourist, that's third person, as soon as a tourist enters Arlington National Cemetery, where many of America's military heroes are buried, you begin to realize how costly the price of liberty is. We've shifted to second person with the pronoun you. So we have to make that consistent. As soon as a tourist enters Arlington National Cemetery, where many of America's military heroes are buried, he or she begins to realize how costly the price of liberty is. Again, nitpicky details here. Always make sure you're going through everything, every paragraph, every sentence, and checking for these little tiny errors and having perhaps someone else take a look for you as well. And then the third way that you can make sure that you have clear sentences is to use specific words. You almost always want to shoot for specific words rather than general words. Specific words create pictures in the reader's mind. They help capture the reader's interest. They help make your meaning more clear. And those types of specific details show us rather than just tell us in a general sense. So we have some examples here. The boy came down the street. Well, if the boy has a name, give the boy a name. If the street has a name, be specific with the street as well. Theo ran down Woodlawn Avenue. Or a bird appeared on the grass. What kind of bird? A blue jay. How did he appear? He swooped. And what can we say about the grass? Well, a blue jay swooped down onto the frost-covered lawn. That's much more specific, and we can imagine that better. Now we're connecting to what you've written. She stopped the car. Jackie slammed on the brakes of her Impala, right? So almost always shoot for specific words rather than general words, right? I know I went through most of this pretty quickly, but these are just smaller things that I just want to point out to you and bring to your attention, and just remind you to look for in your own writing. So don't confuse revising and editing. Revising is style and flow and content and ideas and the bigger picture, the bigger issues. Editing are those small details like spelling and grammar. We can use parallelism, making sure we have parallelism, making sure we have a consistent point of view, and making sure we use specific words. In the next lesson on grammar and mechanics in the week 3 module, you're going to see some lessons where we talk more about using concise wording, varying your sentences, and then some other pretty important grammar lessons that I want to review with you guys sooner rather than later, and it all feeds into making sure that you have the strongest paragraph that you can have. So we're going to be looking at sentence fragments, run-on sentences and comma splices, and modifiers. And then we will also, again, talk more about eliminating wordiness, being concise, and then how to vary your sentences, combine your thoughts in more complex ways. So if you have any questions about everything in this PowerPoint so far, go ahead and let me know, of course. Otherwise, you can go ahead and move on to the lesson that has all the grammar and mechanics in it.